Welcome to the Boomer Buzz, the show that focuses on issues of interest to the 60 and over crowd, both here on Long Island and across the country. Listen as experts keep you informed about the latest health solutions, financial options, and lifestyle choices, both for senior citizens and their families. Now, here are the hosts of the Boomer Buzz, Dr. Lamar Stanford and Patricia Stanford, corporate wellness consultant, on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Welcome to the Boomer Buzz, where each week we try to give you the buzz on how to stay healthy, wealthy, and wise after the age of 60. Today, we are so happy to be speaking with Dr. Michael Roizen, who is the Chief Wellness Officer at the Cleveland Clinic. Dr. Roizen became famous for developing the real age concept, which we're going to be talking with him about, and he has authored and co-authored 5 New York Times bestsellers, including Age Proof, Living Longer Without Running Out of Money or Breaking a Hip with Gene Chatsky. I love that title. You, Staying Young, The Owner's Manual for Looking Good and Feeling Great with Dr. Mehmet Oz. And Real Age, Are You As Young As You Can Be?
Welcome to the show, Dr. Roizen. It's an honor to have such a well-recognized expert on aging in our show today. And
it's a privilege, Lamar. And let me just correct one thing. Mm-hmm. I've actually, and since I've got 4 number 1 New York Times bestsellers, but 9 overall. So I apologize.
Wow.
If that was incorrect.
And you are such an example of, you not only talk the talk, but you walk the talk, and you're an amazing individual, and certainly the best illustration of what a person can do by following certain health patterns and things of that nature. Anyway, maybe you could tell us, Dr. Roizen, about how you developed the concept of real age.
So real age is the actual age of your body as opposed to your calendar age. And your real age can be many years older or younger than your calendar age. And we developed it. I developed it it started in San Francisco when the goal was to motivate people to get healthier prior to or around their cardiovascular operations. So I was co-chair of cardiovascular anesthesia at a very young age at UC, at University of California, San Francisco. And one of the things we noted in working with the surgeons was that and getting the database for all of California, was that the complication rate and death rate for any one procedure was more importantly related to their age than whether they exercised or whether their BUN, their rate of kidney problems was high or low. That the most important factor was their age, and that a 75-year-old had 3 times the mortality rate and disability rate from the same procedure as a 65-year-old and 9 times as a 55-year-old. So I thought our job was to see if we could make patients 10 to 20 years younger in the 2-week period surrounding their operations. This is way back when we didn't do much outpatient surgery at all, and when most surgery was done inpatient. So it was, how do you make them 10 to 20 years younger in the perioperative period, in the period around their operation? And in learning how to do that, you then had to learn how to motivate them. And everyone wants to be younger rather than older. And so we used age as a motivator, real age, their actual age as a motivator, to try and help them get younger. And there, as you probably have figured out, there are 157 things an individual woman can do to make her real age younger, 155 for a guy, and it's I'm a science nerd, so it's all scientifically based, unfortunately.
Excellent. So there's a test for figuring out a person's, quote, real age. And what are some of these factors? Just, like you said, there are quite a few of them, but what are kind of the principal ones there?
So the big 6 are the 6 you might think of is That is, first of all, in addition to your calendar age, which is obviously one, but is what your blood pressure is, what your smoking habits are, how much physical activity you get, and your LDL cholesterol and your HDL cholesterol and your other lipid values, your body mass index, that is your height related to your weight, and we really want a waist size, if you will, compared to your height rather than anything else. And then the amount of stress or stressful events in your life and how you manage them and how many close friends you have. And so each of those things gets broken down. So when you say physical activity, there really are 4 physical activities that have independent effects on your rate of aging. Any physical activity, which includes swimming and walking and gardening, you get credit for it all. And then resistance physical activity, moving weights against a gravity. And then cardio, which is how raising your heart rate to above 80% of your age-adjusted maximum, and then jumping. And all 4 of those have independent effects. So when I say, if you will, your just physical activity, they all effects that affect all the others. And so you have to do, the reason it's such a complex calculation and the reason it took us 7 years to develop the test is that each of these things have what we call covariance. So when you walk, you're going to lower your LDL cholesterol, lower your blood pressure. When you do cardio, you may increase your heart rate to a certain degree, and you may increase your HDL cholesterol. So each of the things has independent effects of the others that you have to factor out.
A friend of mine is a cardiac surgeon, and he states that body weight, I noticed you had the BMI in there, is body weight one of the crucial things? I know smoking and some of these others are pretty crucial too, but is that, if you keep your weight down, is that one of the best checks you can do, even if you don't exercise?
Well, it turns out that body weight per se, that is, if you factor out the LDL cholesterol and factor out the blood pressure and factor out arthritis, etc., body weight is only about a 1.5 to 2 year effect, depending on your age. Whereas, for example, your food choices from worst to best, McDonald's fried diet to the healthiest diet you can have, and you could also have that at McDonald's, by the way. But from the worst to the best would be about a 27-year difference in your rate of aging. So body weight, if you factor out all the other things that it affects, such as your movement, etc., is actually not as big a factor. But because body weight does affect all the others, it ends up, most people think of it as a very important factor. It is, but it isn't it's the result rather than the cause.
Okay.
And you've said that 75% of chronic disease is caused by a few factors that are within our control. Are those some of the factors that are measured by that real age test?
Yeah, Pat, that's very, very true. So if you look at and I'll give you a quick set of references, but if you get what we call 6+2 normals, you reduce your risk of chronic disease by about 70%, in some studies as high as 90%. So in the Medicare database, if you look at people over the age of 65 who do those 6 behaviors or get those 6 factors, normal blood pressure, LDL cholesterol below 70, fasting blood sugar or below 107, or hemoglobin A1C below 6.4, a body mass index below 30, that is not obese, but you can still be overweight, a no cotinine, no secondhand or firsthand smoke in your urine, and you manage stress, you do those in the Medicare database study, you reduce your risk of chronic disease for the rest of your life compared to someone who who had even one of those abnormalities, 70%. You reduce, because you live 30% longer, you reduce your medical spend. That is 30% after age 65. You reduce your medical spend by 50% for the rest of your life, meaning even including that you're going to live longer. And that doesn't include end-of-life spend, which you reduce even more. If you were in the nurse's health study and you got those 6 factors, you reduce your risk of chronic disease if you were a nurse between 44 and 64 when you got those by 90%, if you were a nurse between 27 and 44 by 83%. In the Swedish men's study, you reduce it by 87%. So it's at least 60% if you get those 6 normals that are the most important ones. Now, you do many other things to get to those 6 normals, so I don't want to make it seem that it's just those 6 things, but we look at those 6 endpoints and the +2, so it's 6 normals +2, and the +2 are see a primary care physician once a year, a primary caregiver, it can be a nurse practitioner, once a year, and have your immunizations up to date. So those are the real key things in letting you be younger. Now, we can talk about the behaviors that do that, but those are the endpoints that you want to shoot for.
One question, I'm 75 years old, how would I go through that test? Is there, like here on Long Island?
It's pretty easy. It's free. It's free on realage.com. I started the company Real Age, I and 2 other people, and that were really investors, and we sold it in 2006 to Hearst, and Hearst has subsequently sold it to ShareCare. It's still, and I do have advised them, but it is a free test at realage.com or at sharecare.com.
Excellent.
And it'll certainly open people's eyes when they take it. I've taken the test. So what role does genetics play in all of this?
I should tell you that in fact, 69 million people have now taken the test. About 1 million more take it every 3 months. So it's about it's 1 million take it every month, but a third of those are new people. So it's about 69 million of about. So we feel very lucky that we're able to motivate people to be healthy that way.
That's wonderful.
What you're doing with your genes is you get to, by your actions, change which of your genes are on or not. Let me give you a specific example. So you have 22,500 genes or so in every cell but your red cells. Your red cells don't have any. And of those 22,500, only 1,500 are what we call on at any one time. What we mean by on is they produce proteins or are active in watching other genes and monitoring other genes. So the main function of genes is to produce proteins that change things that occur. So, for example, when you learn when you do a exercise that stresses your muscle, you turn on a gene that makes a small protein that gets across your brain, your blood-brain barrier, to go to your brain and increases the memory functions of your brain by increasing the size. It's essentially you're producing a pre-growth factor for your brain. How do you do that? It's just by exercise. What do you do when you exercise? You turn on some genes, you turn off others. Another way, by managing stress, you turn on genes that make anti-inflammatory proteins and turn off genes that cause or that promote that make proteins that promote inflammation. So while your genes are really the baseline, you get to turn them on or off by your behavior, by your lifestyle choices in a huge number of cases. It's not all of them. Usually the genes that cause severe childhood diseases, we don't know how to turn those off or on by lifestyle choices. But since this is a boomer radio, really, by the time you're 50, over 80% of whether a gene is up or not is your choice. And by the time you're 75, we think that's over 85%, maybe 90% of the time. You get to control which of those genes that matter to how long and well you live, you get to control.
Okay.
Wow, that's important.
I'm Patricia Stanford, along with my husband, Dr. Lamar Stanford, and our guest today is Dr. Michael Roizen, who is one of the most respected experts on aging in the United States. You are listening to the Boomer Buzz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/our stories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Boomer Buzz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Dr. Lamar Stanford, along with my wife, Patricia. And our guest today is Dr. Michael Roizen from the famous Cleveland Clinic. And he has certainly filled us in with a lot of interesting information about making ourselves younger and living more healthy. Dr. Roizen, I've read that you've speculated that by 2023, there might be breakthroughs that will allow us to live until 160 with the same quality of life as we had at age 45. Is that true, or what?
Well, when I was speculating about that, I said there's an exponential, in the late 90s, there was an exponential increase in the amount of money going into aging research. That is, what caused aging, and that and what I said was with an 80% probability, based on that amount of money and the intensity of research, that and the 14 areas of research that were being conducted at that time, that there was an 80% chance a breakthrough would occur by the year 2030, with the most probable year, according to the prediction model. This is the same one that predicts that, if you will, Moore's Law was happening in computers, and that solar, if you will, solar energy would be 10%, would fill 10% of our needs by 2025, that by 2030 we had an 80% probability, with the 50% breakthrough year being 2023. That actually got criticized fairly highly in the local press, the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I work at the Cleveland Clinic, and that was in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I should tell you that 8 years after I said that, Time Magazine had the same headline, that their 3 reporters on the aging story came to the same conclusion, that the first baby already born to live to be 160 was born. We think that's still true, meaning that if you look at the data on what we call an embryonic reboot, that has now been shown in 3 different animal species, and now was reproduced by 2 other places than the 3 centers. So let me go and tell you what that is. You still have in your genes the genes that you had when you were 8 cells old, that directed, for example, a pluripotent stem cell to become a knee, or a pluripotent stem cell to become a heart muscle cell. And thus you should be able to access that and go back and do it. And what caused me to say that in 2004 was the Yokohama factors that would turn on the pluripotent stem cells were discovered, and a Nobel Prize was awarded for that. The problem was at that time that when you activate those, you turn some of these pluripotent stem cells into cancer and you die. Well, it turns out in 2017, again, we've got a lot of money going into aging research. Not enough. There's always room for more money, don't get me wrong. But we had a lot of money going into it so that three groups, a group at Davis and UC San Diego did it in mice, a group at Harvard and MIT did it in male dogs, and a group in Sweden did it in guinea pigs, were able to, in fact, take old mice, 3-year-old mice, and make them the equivalent of 3-month-old mice. And they're still living that term, so they're about 2 years old now. Same thing with 15 to 17-year-old male beagles at Harvard and MIT. They turned them into 3-year-old puppies. They're still living now. They're about 5, if you will, in the new body looks like a 5-year-old, and guinea pigs. And 2 months ago, those were reproduced at Hopkins and in a lab in Switzerland. So we now know you should be able, at least these animal species, you can make their below-the-head bodies. And when I say below the head, I mean anything but their nervous system back to a youthful body. So instead of muscles that are tired, that have more slow twitch as we age, rather than fast twitch, they were able to regenerate fast twitch and the mitochondrial energy that was able to give them youth. So this may be true. We now know some of the areas that are first to benefit are we can regenerate, for example, tendons in vivo and ligaments. That's now being done out of both Boston Children's and Mayo and Cleveland Clinic. Have this Bayer sponge, which is a sponge where you put some of the stem cells, your own stem cells, and growth factors from your blood, taken actually during the operation, and put a if you will, a sponge guide between a torn upper and lower part of your anterior cruciate ligament as a bridge. And now, rather than having to get another tendon and sew it in place, you have this sponge with your own growth factors and pluripotent stem cells on it, and we're regrowing a native anterior cruciate ligament.
Wow!
So
that's really startling.
Yeah, if anyone wants to look that up, I mean, it was developed at Boston Children's Hospital, and a number of us are now doing tests with it to see, will it last much longer than the tendon? Will you have less likelihood of developing arthritis? Turns out that between 5 and 15 years later, about 70% of people, after they get an ACL repair, an anterior cruciate ligament repair, and their knee will develop arthritis in it. Well, we think that by doing this native one, might have much less. So we're learning how to take your own pluripotent stem cells and make them make you new organs.
Wow.
Well, if that really does happen with the rapidity we expect it to, sometime by 2030, we'll be able to do everything but your brain. And so now that gives you more impetus to do things to keep your brain functioning and young. And there are 12 ways we know how to prevent. There are 12 choices we know that you can make that keep your brain young. We don't know very well how to we don't know very well how to treat dementia. We're lousy at treating dementia. We have no active, successful treatment getting at the basic mechanism of disease, but we have a lot of things that say you can reduce your genetic risk by 90%.
Now,
so, for example,
excuse me for just a moment.
If someone has a double E4 and has a very high risk, it still is reduced 90% from that high risk.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned 12 choices that would help us to...
Can we just do a station ID and then we'll get to what those are?
Okay, if you want to.
Sure. You're listening to the Boomer Buzz. If you're just joining us, it's the voice of Nassau Community College, Nassau 90.3 WHPC, and our guest today, you're listening to Dr. Michael Roizen.
Now, Dr. Roizen, what were those 12 choices that you said would enhance brain function and health? Where would we find those? Are they on the site that we did for the Real Age?
Well, they're undoubtedly there. I don't know. They're in some YouTube presentations we've done as well. But let me give you, I'll start you with some of them, and then you can see how common they are. The major ager for our brain, that is the thing that is most associated with developing and accelerating dementia, is stress. So learning how to manage stress, whether it is with purpose in life or friends or meditation or guided imagery, whatever it does for you is the key. The second thing is doing the 4 components of physical activity. Each one of those has an ability to increase your hippocampal size. So the hippocampus is the key area of the brain. Where memory center and where cognitive function. So the third one is doing speed of processing games. So if you do memory games, you improve memory, but you don't decrease your risk of dementia. If you do crossword puzzles, you get better at crossword puzzles, but you don't decrease your risk of dementia.
Oh, darn.
If you do reasoning games, you get better at reasoning, but you don't decrease your risk of dementia. The only thing that decreases your risk of dementia is what are called speed of processing games. And they do that in randomized controlled studies starting at people at age 73 and over a 10-year period, just doing 18 hours of practice over this 10-year period, decreased dementia risk by 48%. In the PET scans of it, it actually increases acetylcholine production and acetylcholine release. Doesn't work because it's very tough to do these speed of processing games once people have developed dementia, so it doesn't work as a treatment, but all of these things work as prevention. I'm sorry, Lamar.
Yeah, one question. Have you heard of the site called Lumosity? It's online, and it has, I think those are the games you're talking about, aren't you? Aren't you with the...
Well, it's actually at AARP. Mm-hmm. You can, if you're a member of AARP, for $5 more, you get Staying Sharp, and it is the Brain HQ, the competitor of Lumosity. It was Brain HQ that came up with freeze frame and double decision. Now, Lumosity also has games that are speed of processing. We don't know that they do the same thing, but we suspect they do. So AARP, for $5 more in your membership, go to Staying Sharp and do the freeze frame and double decision. Only takes literally 18 hours, 2 hours a week for 5 weeks in the first month, 2 hours a week in month 11, 2 hours a week for 2 months in month 35. So 18 hours over the 10-year period, randomized controlled study, now repeated, decreases your risk of dementia almost 50%. Really remarkable.
It really
Dr.
is.
Roizen, I cannot believe it, but our time has gone. We need to have you back. This has been wonderful. We got so much interesting information. And we hope that we can get you back soon to discuss some other issues.
Anytime, Pat. Thank you.
We have so many other questions. I'm Patricia Stanford, along with my husband, Lamar Stanford, and you've been listening to the Boomer Buzz on 90.3 WHPC. This show will be available, and listen again, because Dr. Roizen has some great things to talk about, as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, Spotify, and Spreaker.com. If you have comments, email them to to us at any time at WHPC@ncc.edu. Thank you for listening to the Boomer Buzz here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.